So I'm going to be going over the increasing student involvement in the IEP and transition process presentation for OTC. And to start off, we're going to go through the scenario posed by this article, Why is this cake on fire? And we'll talk about it once the scenario is over. So what we want you to do first is imagine that you are a small child in elementary school, and you're a kid again, and those were the best years of your life. So go back to that time. And you, in this childhood age of yours, you keep hearing your parents plan about an upcoming birthday party, and you're so excited because you've heard about birthday parties and it's getting closer, but the party comes and goes and you are never actually invited. And you think for that first year, maybe they just forgot to invite me. And then the next year comes and you hear about it again right around that same time. You have a birthday party coming up and they're going to be talking about some great things and all the different jobs and important people that are supposed to be there, and it's going to be bigger and better. But again, you're not invited. So you start thinking that maybe it's just not that important after all. The following year, another birthday, another missed invitation, and you decide that birthday parties are just not important. Several years later, now you're a teenager and your birthday is coming up. Big deal. At this point, you don't really care anymore. But now you do get an invite to your party, and you're surprised and confused, and you don't understand exactly why, because they never have invited you before. And you're told that you're old enough to help with everything, but you don't know what to do. So why are you just getting invited now? If it's such a big deal, why wasn't it a big deal when you were younger to get invited? We want you to imagine the scenario again, but it's an IEP meeting. Many times we have IEP meetings with students, especially when they're younger, and we don't invite them. We tell them about it, or sometimes neglect to tell them anything and just make plans for the student without ever having to bring the student in. Until that they get into that larger age, that teenage age. And when we get to that age, we do start inviting students, but we don't prepare them to be participants, but we also expect them to be fully involved and not quite have the means for them to do that. So the goals for today in this webinar would be to understand the importance of student involvement and learn how students can be involved and how we as teachers can help assess them and teach those involvement skills. So why involve students in the first place? Well, first, and most importantly, it's a federal law. So PL 94-142, the IDEA, says to invite students when appropriate. I'd like to argue that it's always appropriate to invite your student. It may not always be appropriate to invite for the entire meeting or for certain durations if there are sensitive topics that maybe parents don't want the students to be privy to just yet. But it is appropriate to invite the students to meetings as much as possible. Now, IDEA requires that we start inviting students to the meetings at age 16 or 9th grade. I think whichever one comes first. A lot of states start at 14, which is great, and there's a push to start states at even younger ages, so possibly around 12 or earlier. So the difference that we have at age 16, what we're seeing is that we do invite the student to attend, but there's a big difference between attending a meeting and participating in a meeting. You know, attendance is passive. You're sitting at the table, nobody's asking you questions, and nobody's expecting you to say something. But when you are participating, and teachers may know this and know it very well as special education teachers running an IEP meeting, you are active. You are a member of that team. Your input is especially important, and you are being talked with, not at. So it's that same concept, but we have to apply it to students. That meeting is about the student. Their input is important, and it makes a difference in the quality and of the meeting and the IEP, and we are talking with the students, not about or at them. So just some more research, but something that kind of helps put our mindset into what is currently happening. At teacher-led IEP meetings, the person who does the majority of the time or spends the majority of the time talking is the special education teacher. It's about 50%. And the student, if you could see up here, is about 4%. And it's the smallest amount of percent of anyone talking, other than those lulls in the conversation when nobody's talking, right? And ideally, in the most ideal world that we could think of, this should be inverse. You know, the teacher should be have things prepared and have the student prepare, and the student should be doing the majority of the talking. We know reality is that special education teachers are the ones who technically hold the most knowledge on the happenings of the IEP, and they lead and they guide the meetings, and they have to clarify lots of information. But we should be allowing that 4% of students talking to really increase as much as possible. Now, just a quick comparison of what happens when a teacher directs an IEP meeting and the student directs the IEP meeting. So at the student, just something as simple as introducing yourself, saying, "Hi, my name is John." If the student at a teacher-directed IEP meeting only does it 3.5% of the time. But when a student is leading the IEP meeting, it jumps up to 70%. So something you think is not that important, saying your name or saying the reason for why you're here at this meeting, those two things can be taught to a student fairly simply and in many different ways, in which some will go over and hopefully they'll be supportive to teachers. But it makes a big difference once we start putting some of that meeting responsibility onto the student so that they can learn to lead their own discussion as it pertains to their education. So we're going to go over a little research more to back up the reasons why we need to do this. So we're looking at the concept of self-determination, and most simply put, self-determination is the skills any individual needs to be able to advocate for themselves, to be able to make decisions and act upon those decisions. So if your student in their head, or their biggest goals and dreams, they know what they want, but we haven't helped them, or their families haven't helped them, or they haven't just been explicitly taught those self-determination skills to be able to verbally, in written expression, and however else that a student needs to be able to say it or to show it to someone what it is they want, how it is they're going to get there, and the skills that they personally need to get to that goal, then they're lacking in those self-determination skills. A lot of those skills can be honed for our students with disabilities before and during their IEP meeting, and after as well when we're working on goals. So our research shows that by promoting self-determination, the students are most likely to have positive adult outcomes. So it's an ABC equation. If we're teaching students very early to advocate for themselves and to act upon those things that they want, then once they leave our school buildings, they are more likely to have better employment outcomes because they know their goals, they know how to reach them, and they know how to act upon them. Those skills translate to independent living, their general quality of life, relationships. And those are the things that we want, ideally for all students to have great outcomes in. However, research shows us that students with disabilities tend to have much lower outcomes in those areas. And they can't learn those skills and behaviors on their own. So we need to do, as teachers, we need to be able to give our students guidance to do this. And I'll go over some ways to assess and hopefully increase those skill areas. So schools with the most promising transition practices use curriculum design specifically for self-determination. They teach and coach students to participate in the IEP process, and they try to enhance student choices and decision-making skills. And we know sometimes that could be a shaky ground because we'll have students who their big goals and choices are maybe not the best or the safest or in best interest, but we as teachers can guide into learning how to make appropriate decisions and choices that are best for the outcomes that the student wants for themselves. So when students lead their IEP meetings, they will demonstrate these self-determination skills. And a big one is public speaking. And we think a lot of public speaking in terms of like standing in front of a huge audience, but a lot of the times public speaking would just be to those main people in that room. And if you've had students participate and they're not really prepared for what that means to participate, they're shaky, they're angry, they break down, or they just completely shut off and won't say anything, which is not how you know them outside of the classroom or anything. That form of public speaking is also the same kind of form that we see in employment, those same kind of interview skills or volunteer skills, or relationship skills, friend or romantic, that students need to learn how to navigate appropriately. Those can all start with them learning how to talk and speak for themselves and about themselves during that IEP meeting. So once students are capable of doing that, and we know there's a lot of hesitation sometimes from students themselves, but they are more likely to take ownership of their own educational planning. And this is a skill that we tend to take advantage of students in the gen ed environment, because they may not need so much guidance and support in order to advocate for themselves and to tell you what it is they want. However, we know that our students with disabilities may need some more supports in those areas, and we can do that with certain skills and curriculum. So student-led IEP meetings provide those opportunities to increase those social skills, to increase those speaking skills. I think this is just a repeat of the slide, but again, very important. So how to get involved?
Question?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
So what do you do if a student just refuses to attend? Do you have any ideas for this person?
Yeah, we definitely have students who refuse to attend, and in my experience, legally for IDEA, you have to do what you have to do. You have to get your student to sign the paper that says, no, I do not want to attend, even though we all want you to attend, even if it's just for 2 minutes. But if the student is absolutely refusing to, I would always have wanted them to verbally or in a written expression tell me why it is that they refuse to go. And that's just, you kind of get at the core of the problem. Well, nobody ever talks to me while I'm there, or I just think this is stupid, or my parents aren't going to come anyway, so who cares? There's a lot of reasons why a student would choose not to go. And at the end of the day, they have the right to say that they don't want to go. But, as teachers, we want our students to be able to be there because it's their meeting and we're talking about them. And it would be silly to make decisions for a person without including that person's opinion in any way. So if there's a way to get them involved, at least to tell you their aspirations and their needs and preferences from how they see it, it might just be a support in creating a better IEP than not inviting or not getting any input from the student at all. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I have to remember to unmute.
So these are some hopefully very teacher-friendly tips that we're going to be giving now, and we're going to start small on how to get students involved, but then we'll go into a little bit more complex, the thinking bigger area of how to get students involved. So one of the things we can do is the invitation. The invitation to the IEP meeting is a very simple thing, right? As teachers, we know this. You print the invitation, you send it, or you send an email to your co-teachers and you tell them this is when the meeting is. You can have the student do a lot of this work. Of course, you should supervise some of that work because you want to make sure it's still done appropriately and you need to record the interactions, but the student can, during lunchtime or passing period, can phone call the other teacher, the math teacher that's going to come and be the gen ed representative, or call their parents, or send an email and just say, hi, my IEP meeting is on February 12th at 1 p.m. and I really want you to be there. This is John, by the way, however students send their emails. And you practice a lot of different skills in that way: appropriate phone call, appropriate email, what to say when you want somebody there. Another one is you could personally, as a teacher, print the invitation for the team member and have the student personally deliver. They could just go ahead and give them that piece of paper. They could also deliver and then verbally request their attendance. And this is something you could practice with the student. The student, have a little quick drill and practice. Say, Miss Hannigan, I really want you to come to my IEP meeting. It's February 12th. Here's the paper. You can let Miss James know when the meeting is. And then, so that's a quick and easy way to do that. And you can also have the student write an attached note expressing why they want their teacher to come or their parent to come, and the importance of that attendance. And those are skills that build up with time. So if you have your student in a school environment and coming at 9th grade and they don't really know anything, and about their IEP and you want to really start them off with getting involved, you can start at step 2, next year step 3, the year after that step 4, and kind of scaffold as needed and based on the student. My biggest advice at the bottom, you'll see that if you do any of these, my advice would be to keep a written record of who sent and received the information, when and where it happened. Those things may seem excessive at the time, especially when you're doing a lot at once, but it does come out to really support you in the end. We know we do have parents who sometimes cannot attend or do not respond to any of the invitations, and we don't want to get caught in a place where, you know, later on you've tried to invite the parent 6 or 7 times, but it's not written down anywhere. So now, you know, you find yourself embroiled in a situation you didn't want to be in. So in those cases, writing something and keeping those when, where, and who in mind would be very helpful for teachers, and something that the student can also help do. So then we have the one pager, and many teachers may be familiar with I'm Determined, and I'm just gonna go ahead and praise I'm Determined a little bit. They are this wonderful website of free resources for parents and students and families. And one of the most famous things to come out of there is this simple sheet. It's the one pager, which a lot of us, again, may be familiar with, but just throwing it out again, this is the student's own way for them to tell you what their strengths, interests, preferences, and needs are. These directly align to that transition portion of the IEP that asks, what are the student's strengths, needs, interests, and preferences? And whatever it is that they fill out on this paper, you could just go ahead and either upload and just type in their responses. A lot of the times teachers may know this information just because they've been around the student so much, and you're definitely welcome to add that in the written section of the IEP, but you want the student to be able to write it or express it themselves however possible. So here you have 2 versions telling you similar things. So the first version is typed and a picture of the student. This could also be handwritten paper pencil version. The other one is a computerized version where the student is just pulling up graphics and pictures of what it is that they like and what interests them. And this could be much more complex than that, obviously. So I'm Determined to host a transition conference in the District of Columbia, and when I was there, they had all of these cutouts of pictures and magazines and clip art just all spread out across the table and glue sticks. And my students with more severe profound needs were able to express the things that they liked just with those pictures and glue sticks, a method that they had been very familiar with by the age that we were working with them. So there's many different ways to attack this. And again, sometimes with my group that went to that fair, their pictures may not always might have made sense, but they chose them for a reason. And those reasons we shared, and we shared the work with, or the page with the parents. So your child worked on this, and something about this they liked, and they wanted to tell you about it because they knew the purpose of the one pager as well. So it's an example of what one can do. The next, a little bit, it goes back to a little bit of the information we discussed in the research. Introductions. The introduction at the IEP meeting is probably one of the easier steps you can teach a student to do, and also one that is most often missed. So when you're looking at IEP meetings, a lot of the times we don't all introduce ourselves. Sometimes only just the special education teacher introduces him or herself, and everybody else just kind of goes along. So, and you know, in real life, that's perfectly fine. It usually works, and everybody knows what they're there for. But stating it and having it come from the student themselves, and having the student tell you why they're there and why you're there, makes a difference. So it kind of puts at the front of everybody's mind the reason why and the perspective of what is happening. So again, simple scaffolding and simple hearing. The student can easily start their meeting, say, hi, my name is John, this is my IEP meeting. And we know that students might mumble that, it might not look anybody in the eye, but they said it, and that's the first thing that everyone heard before anything else was said. You can scaffold this and have the student introduce others in the meeting. So you could start off with their parents. So, hi, my name is John, points at his mom, this is Cindy, she's here, and we're all here for my IEP meeting. Or you can have the student introduce everyone at the table. Ideally, that student should know everyone at that table, should have interactions with them. My name is John. This is my mom, Cindy. Here's my special education teacher, my math teacher, my counselor, and we are all here for my IEP meeting. And something, it sounds silly and simple, but it is very simple, but it's something that students don't tend to get the opportunity to do very often at their own meetings, even though these meetings are about them. So we could drill and practice those at school and home. We could have a little script on a note card that a child could read during the IEP meeting. Or I've had a student pre-record because he was so nervous to be in front of everyone, even though he knew everyone. But something about sitting in a round table is scary to students when they haven't had to do that before. So he pre-recorded on his phone and we played that, and then everybody just went along with it. Just a way for students to get along or to introduce themselves first.
Great idea.
So,
great idea
yes.
to do the recording. I love that.
So, you could record a lot of different parts of that. And so actually going back to that student who doesn't want to participate in the actual meeting, doesn't want to show up, maybe you can record them doing something. And we'll go over a little bit about videos and recording in a minute, but there are ways to have a student involved that are maybe less invasive during the meeting time, if it's a little bit too much pressure at the time for the student. So you could also do presentations and posters, and the idea is that you would take that one pager and kind of just expand it into something bigger. And you could use, if a student with computer skills, and we know that that's the majority of our students these days, can create a PowerPoint presentation or Google slide or Prezi, and they could share it during their IEP meeting. And this doesn't have to be limited to just, their needs, interests, and preferences. A student can go as creative and as expansive as they really feel, and they can present great classwork that they've done, just some pictures of stuff that they have taken that they really want to share with everyone. And also you have to allot for time and to be sensitive of time of everyone present at the meeting, but the student can really work on this, and this could be a year-long goal for them to do. So the student creates and then practices presenting prior to the meeting. They could present to the class, they could present to their friends, they could present to you one-on-one as a teacher. There's lots of different ways, again, more individualized to the student what is appropriate. And of course, this can be done with other types of visual aids. So videos, what I was saying a little bit before, we have an example of one, but a great idea is for a student to record themselves or have them be recorded and sharing information. And that information would then be shown during the IEP meeting. So a simple way to do that would be to sit in front of the camera and just share their basic needs, strengths, and any concerns that they may have. I've had students do interview style, and they had a lot of fun with this. They were also very creative students, where someone off camera would ask the questions, usually a friend, and it'd be like 2020 style. You'd get the student answering the questions as if it's a very serious interview, but that, it's showing some of the students' specific interests and skills and abilities in editing and making movies and videos. And then you can also have the students who are very, very good at technology and would love to edit videos, and they're the ones who are always messing around with their phones and taking different kinds of pictures and videos of their friends or of the school. There's a lot of different free apps, especially, I think I only know about the iPhone, but there's a lot of different ones there that they could do stuff with. And they're, depending on how appropriate it is, teachers need to, make sure that this still works within the setting. But this can definitely be shown during the IEP meeting. The student can add to it during the IEP meeting and explain what it is they did and why they did it that way and why it's important for them to share it, or they could let the video do the talking for them. And so when for severe profound groups, I'm trying to scale as best I can for students who maybe are doing work study in the school, or they went on a field trip, or are doing a specific type of assignment that you as a teacher have permission to record. You can share that during the IEP meeting. This was really great for me with students who were verbally limited and couldn't readily or easily express all the work that they have been doing. And so a lot of those times parents are not quite aware of what's been happening in the school. They just, they kind of remain a little bit oblivious to that. But we can definitely show those videos of the student doing work, or pictures of the students doing different types of work or enjoying and participating in school activities, and share those during the IEP meetings. Those make a very big difference to parents, because all of a sudden they're able to see not just a quarterly report card or a biannual progress report or anything like that. They're able to see actual evidence of their child working and doing stuff where they may not have known that before. So here's an example of a very quick student involvement video.
My name is Chris Brown, and I guess this meeting is about me. I'm already a freshman in high school and will be earning a high school diploma in just 3 more years. During this year, I want to get my driver's license. Then, after I graduate, I want to go to college. I'm not sure yet exactly what I want to do after college, but I think I want to be a teacher or at least work in a school. I'm here today to share information about me regarding what I want when I leave high school and to listen to what everyone else says. I hope we can be done in an hour because I don't want to miss PE.
So it's simple, and it shows a little bit about that student, and it's enough for us to gauge, he told us what he wants, what he's currently thinking about, and we know he likes PE because he does not want to miss it. And so something along those lines, that was a 44-second video. We can coerce our students and, convince them we can do 44 seconds. We can do less than a minute. You can just tell me, add this camera and we will show this to everyone. And it makes a difference to say that you are more involved than you were the year before. And then next year, we're going to get more involved in that. And we're moving there. We don't have to throw it all at once at our students. So a different way to get involved, and this is particularly for our readers, right? Students who have that ability to read, we can give them scripts. And there's many, many free scripts that are available for teachers to use. At the end of this PowerPoint, there's going to be a link to a Google Doc that we have created where there's just all the assessment links and the scripts, and everything's free, so that just to peruse at your own will. But scripts can vary from simple to complex. Again, this is not a new idea. I'm sure many teachers are already doing this, but just to extend on that, we can give students the outlines for a script of things that they kind of like fill in the blanks. And they're going to read these in order, and you're going to cue them at certain points to give their information of things that they've prepared on their script. They can practice this before the meeting. They could bring it with them completely ready to go and share when cued. It depends on the level of the student. The scripts can be very, very simple and completely scaffolded. You can make them as if they're a guided note and there's just a few fill in the blanks, or you can make them very open and the students are putting in a lot of their own work into that. I've had students who wanted to make their own script. They wanted to kind of guide what they wanted to say on their own, just a blank piece of paper, and they wrote everything that they wanted to share with everyone. And during the meeting, they read from the script and they shared from that. For those open scripts, just make sure that it's appropriate and sensitive to people's time as well, because we do have students who love to just share and give all the information. Sometimes that might have to be reined in a little bit, but a great way for students to practice what it is that they want to say and how they will say it. So just some examples of scripts, and these are moderate. The one that says Stevens IEP script is more moderate level of support, but then the Melissa IEP script has a lot more information and they can do a lot with that. So we've gone over ways for students to get involved and hopefully simple enough ways for teachers to start moving those things forward. Now I want to go over facilitating and teaching involvement in IEP meetings. So the first one is to train other teachers. And if we've been in very traditional teacher-led only settings, a lot of the times anyone outside of the special education teacher and student may not really understand the purpose of wanting to involve that student more, right? Parents may not be used to that. Gen ed teachers may not be used to that either if they're present and participating. So having a school-wide training on IEP involvement and its importance would be helpful. Lunch and learns or PLC times would also could also be incorporated to teaching other teachers in the building why to do that. So when I was teaching in the gen ed environment, I was lucky enough to be able to once a month go to the PLC for the English department, and then the next month go to the math department, and each hit every department that we had and talk about what it is I needed the teachers to do and turn in before the IEP meeting, during the IEP meeting, and what it is they should expect to see. And my expectation for what they should see was the student talking most of the time. And while the student was talking, we did not interrupt them. We asked them questions like after they finished speaking, but we needed that student to talk and to share their perspective first and foremost. And I never really received any negative feedback from teachers, and they seemed to accept it as long as those standards were very clear. And there's a couple different ways to do that, so I'll show in a minute a quick PowerPoint you could play at the beginning of meetings. Professional developments are great ways to do this as well. If there's a school-wide professional development day, maybe there's a chance for you as a special education teacher to ask to put on a session for other teachers in the building. And it also looked great on the special education teacher's behalf. So teaching students is a whole other type of teaching. But for those lucky enough to have their own resource or lab setting, or even their own transition course, I'm very jealous of that. But you could use a specific amount of that time to do mini lessons or full lessons depending on curricula. And I'll go over some hopefully free or some curricula that's free that may hopefully be an aid to the situation. And this can be done little by little. It could take all year long to teach certain steps. So by the time the next year comes, that student is ready. Again, we're not trying to throw our students to the wolves, but we are trying to get them to be more involved. One of our coworkers here at the Zero Center has done an IEP boot camp for a number of years, where they have all the students sign or have their parents give permission to do a field trip, and that field trip is to the auditorium for about 2 or 3 days. And in that auditorium, they are doing student involvement activities. They're completing their one-pagers. They're doing, they're practicing their information. This is the very beginning of the year. And so that this is to be a time saver, because a lot of those teachers in that setting couldn't have those resources to take a whole, just use brand new curricula and go against what's already been planned out. So having this field trip boot camp time allowed for those skills to be honed in a short amount of time, and then to be used and practiced before the actual IEP meetings happened. The same could be done for a leadership retreat for all students with disabilities. Again, field trip format, but then at this point you're also working on a lot of the times we have students who say they have no special skills, they're no strengths. This would be a great time to start working on those, to have them help each other and help themselves identify what those really good strengths are and what their actual needs are. So self-determination assessments to help with those skills that we need for students to get more involved. These are all free and all available at the Zero Center website, which we'll have a link to at the end. So there's the AIR self-determination assessment. As you see, there's an example at the bottom, and this provides an example of the questions at the bottom, and they're relatively easy. They're a 1 to 5 scale. The questions can be read aloud. Teachers can support. Students can do it on their own as well. This provides a profile of the student's level of self-determination. And in general, what it's telling you is low self-determination also means low level of skills needed to advocate for themselves. We want our students to have high levels of self-determination so that they are appropriately and accurately advocating for themselves and working towards the goals that they've that they have identified. These assessments, the AIR and the ARC, which is next, are both considered valid. They could be used for the IEP transition portion. And I will say the AIR is fairly easy in regular usage. It could be easily scored as well. The ARC questions are nearly identical. They're very similar. The only difference is that it's a little bit more difficult to score for this. We get a lot of phone calls here at the Zero Center of people just wanting to make sure that they scored it correctly or having questions about how to score, which all special education teachers are welcome to do. Feel free to call the Zero Center. We will help out as needed. But it's looking at the strengths and weaknesses in self-determination for students with disabilities. And it's getting at those same points that we want to know what level our self-determination is and what specific areas we need to work on to get those levels higher. And those levels translate directly into student involvement. So now we have curriculum, and there's full curriculum and mini curriculum and different things we can do to support those skills for students. And again, they're all under the big umbrella of self-determination, but we're getting at the area of student involvement. So we have the self-directed IEP. For those who are ready to start moving their students over complete to self-directed IEP, this is one of the instructional packages available in the Choice Maker, which again is free. But the self-directed IEP gives you all the steps, and it's about 6 units, I think, to have the student completely on their own direct their IEP, or as much as possible. Then we have the Me, and then the transition bell ringers based off the Me. So the Me is a full curricula. It's 10 units, and each lesson ranges about 45 to 60 minutes. A lot of the lessons in the Me are self-awareness, self-advocacy. There's some information there specific to IEPs and disability awareness. Now, if you, like most teachers, we know here, do not have the time to implement a whole full curriculum, you could do the bell ringer or Do Now, or the first 5 minutes. There's lots of different names for them, but transition bell ringers are really great. They take 5 minutes. They could be journaling, they could be talk aloud, discussion time, whatever is best for your classroom environment. But here's an example of one of those questions in the bell ringer. What do you feel you are good at doing? It could be at school or at home. If a student writes this down, you feel free to share that, again, with the student's permission, feel free to share that piece that they wrote during the IEP meeting. And you could put that right into your IEP document as well. My name is John. I wrote this in class. What do you feel you're good at doing? I'm really good at skateboarding and making friends. So he's athletic and he has great communication skills with his peers. That's wonderful. Those are great things we know that he's good at doing. And that we just learned really easily during this 5-minute activity in classroom. So the transition bell ringers, there's 3 different sets, and they're each a PowerPoint slide, and there's about 50 slides each. You could do them in whichever order you like, pick and choose which ones you want. There's a lot of introductory activities. They're also called elementary activities because they can be used for younger grades or different varying levels of ability. There's some specific to secondary students, and then there's financial literacy, which is my personal favorite because we know financial literacy and financial needs are very important for students with disabilities.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where can you find those resources?
So all of these resources can be found at the Xero Center website under transition education materials, I believe. But at the end, I will make sure to show you exactly where there's a PowerPoint. There is a link and a QR code that can be scanned, so you could just easily get the links to those.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
So then we have the IEP team education module. And this is perhaps one of my favorite ones that we have on our website because it is so simple, and also it's my professor's voice, which makes me just laugh a little bit. But it's a 3-minute PowerPoint, and you would just have to open the PowerPoint and press play at the beginning of each IEP meeting. And just the team members need to listen to the PowerPoint. And all that the PowerPoint says over and over again is, this is the students' meeting. This is not the teacher's meeting. This is not the parents' meeting. This is not the principal's meeting. This is the students' meeting. And this happens over a 3-minute period in the PowerPoint. And as silly as it sounds, our results have shown that parents or IEP team members allow and make space for the student to participate and be involved more than if they hadn't heard this PowerPoint. It just puts, again, in the beginning of everyone's mind, the reason for them being there today is the student, not the IEP specific. It is the student specific. It is their meeting. It is their education that we are discussing, but we are discussing it with them. So very simple, and it can be modified. Teachers can make their own versions of this, but this one is just easy and it has positive results, and it, you know, doesn't take more than 3 minutes. So I would recommend using it if you have a receptive team. Then we have the Whose Future Is It Anyways curriculum, and it's student-directed transition planning. So it's 6 sections, contains 36 lessons. It's recommended that you do them in order, but it doesn't have a specific time period. And the main goal of it is to help prepare students for their IEP meetings. And it's really great if you have the space in your classroom or class schedule to start doing these. I've had teachers who've worked with them 1 lesson a week. And they get through maybe about half of the curriculum. The next year, hopefully they're still with the same group and we'll move forward. But in that school year, they are really just working towards those self-determination skills, and it's very pertains to students' IEP meetings. So then we have the student-directed transition planning graph. And the thing that a lot of people don't know about this graph on our website is that each of these boxes and each of these words here in this main box that says pre and post are actual links that you can click and that will lead you to materials for that link. So if you are looking at something specific and you want to know about awareness, you can click that, and a set of I think about 2 or 3 lessons come up for just awareness, and it happens for each and every one of these clickable link areas. So there are 8 major lessons designed, but each one of them has its own specific set of materials that can be used, and it's looking at facilitating life planning, adult life planning after high school. And it's taking in perspective of the family, the student, and the educators. So it's a really great lesson, and you just kind of click around and play with it and see what it is that is there that is used for you and your student. So to add with all of that, a lot of the work that we do here at the Zero Center is helping teachers with their IEPs and their transition plans specifically. And one of the biggest areas that we see that are areas of need for support are goal writing. So we came up with this goal writing little sheets is a goal writing 101. And the 3 main things that we're looking at is condition, behavior, and criterion. A great and effective goal would have these 3 things. So condition, where and what is needed to perform the behavior, meaning what are we giving the student to be able to be successful in what we need them to do. The behavior is actually what we need them to do. What is the goal? What is the thing that we're getting at there? And the criterion is what is the standard for minimally acceptable performance, meaning 60%, 80% completion, 5 out of 5. You know, what is considered a completed goal there? So goals can be simple or complicated. They just should be effective for the student, and they should also be reasonable. You know, passing English is not a goal for your student. Passing English is a goal for every single student, but something more specific to the student is being able to use those skills learned in English to be able to write their college essays, or to be able to submit for a poem competition, whatever it is that their main goal is that they want to do. So an example of one, using T-charts for recording. That is your condition. That is a thing that we are giving the student. Evie, our student, will research 3 community college programs in nursing, listing at least 5 pros and cons of attending each, and then write a paragraph describing her preferred program. And so that whole section, research, listing, and then writing a paragraph would be the behavior. We want her to be able to do all 3 things by the end of the year. So using 15 out of the 30 listed pros and cons, and that is a criterion. We want her to have 15 of those pros and cons that she listed, or that she had, it as her criterion. That is how we're going to determine it's minimally acceptable. And, you know, hopefully more, and hopefully it's a great paragraph, and she did all the work and has all the proof to back that up. That is a great post-secondary goal. They don't need to be nearly as complicated as that. They could be, you know, depending on your student, the student could just start at researching 3 community college programs. The next year, the student can look, or in the next couple months after that, the student can look at listing the 5 pros and cons. The next couple months after that, then they could write a paragraph. They don't all have to be listed on the IEP goal, but they should be appropriate to the student. And hopefully, if you do it this way, you could space out when those things are due and needed and necessary to present. So along with goal writing, there's progress monitoring, right? Teachers know that we need to be monitoring our students' progress. We have many different ways of doing that. We might have school specific or district specific ways, but they should be, we know that we recommend, of course, that they be done at regularly scheduled interviews and recorded in some form or manner. And a lot of that is for ourselves as teachers to just have the sake of mind to know that those things are recorded and your job is done and done correctly. But we can also have our students monitor their own selves and their own goals. So, cell phones are not allowed in schools, yet all of my students always have their cell phones on them at all times. And what we would do was take those cell phones and help them put in calendar reminders, those things that automatically pop up on your calendar, right? We know how to use them because we use our calendars on our computers and our cell phones all the time. Our students may not be as aware that they even have a calendar app on their phone other than to see what the date is. But we show them and we'll say, in 2 weeks, I want you to come to me and tell me what your progress is on the goal. In 2 weeks after that, an alarm is going to go off on your phone and it's going to say, report to Ms. Praslin and tell her how you're doing on finding colleges. And that would be just an easy way. They'll come and they'll just self-monitor. They'll say, oh yeah, my thing came up. I looked up 3 colleges and I don't like any of them. Or I've looked up all the colleges in the state and I've chosen these 2 to apply to. Or, the reality is that students may also come to you and say, I forgot I had this goal. It came up on my phone today. My biggest suggestion is that if you put it on the student's phone, you also put it on your own calendar or some kind of form so that just for accountability purposes, that's the day the student should be coming. Because if that's just a way to help students get into the mindset of monitoring their own goals, because we know, of course, that once they leave our buildings, there's not going to be somebody carrying around their IEP and their goals for them, and having them kind of take ownership of that is very important. If students use agendas, because we know that happens a lot at the beginning of the year, but then kind of trails off as the months go on. But if you do have students who are active users of their agendas or of calendars of different kinds, or respond to just having some kind of visual sticky paper or something like that, feel free to use those methods as well, whatever is best for the student, but they should be monitoring and reporting their own progress. Again, I'm Determined, great website. They have a rubric for student involvement on their website. It has more steps than just the 3 shown, but it's a really great one. And we could use this as a pre and a post for a student in different areas, IEP awareness, IEP participation, and we work towards those skills that may be at level 1s or 2s and hopefully increase them to levels 3 and 4 by the next school year or by the end of the year. So as far as resources go, that's the main ones we covered. If you're an iPhone user, you can open up your camera app and just take a picture of this QR code and it should take you directly to the link, or the tiny URL link for all the resources is down below. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the Xero Center. We are more than happy to answer any of them, especially since the resources provided are available on our website as well, which I will should be linked in that code.
I think we're good then.
All right.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, of course.